On Monday, a protest was organised in Parliament Square by human rights campaigners in the hope of drawing to attention the imprisonment of Guantanamo detainee Shakir Amr, the last British resident in the prison. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Absent Justice with me, Muazzam Beg. The demonstrators on Monday organised a protest in an effort to continue to publicise the e-petition to the British government, which calls for Shakir's release from Guantanamo and his return to the UK. It needs 100,000 signatures by May the 14th to qualify for a discussion in Parliament. Shakir Amr, a Saudi national with a British family in South London, has been held in Guantanamo Bay without charge or trial since February 2002. He was cleared for release by the Pentagon in 2007. So why does he continue to languish at the controversial detention facility? And why is the prison still open despite repeated promises that it will be closed down? Well, before we discuss those issues and more, here's Huria Al-Haddad with a report.
Human rights campaigners are hoping to draw attention to the imprisonment of Guantanamo Bay detainee Shakir Amr by publicising an online petition to the British government which calls for Shakir's release from Guantanamo and his return to the UK. Despite being cleared for release for over 5 years and never being charged with an offence, UK resident Shakir Amr has been unlawfully imprisoned and tortured at Guantanamo Bay for over 10 years by the United States. In June 2001, Shakir went to Afghanistan to do some voluntary work for an Islamic charity. But after September 11, he was picked up and sold to the US Army. During his time in US detention, in Afghanistan as well as in Guantanamo Bay, Shakir has been subjected to sustained torture and cruel, inhumane and degrading treatment, including beatings, lengthy interrogations, exposure to extreme cold, sensory deprivation, stress positions, long-term solitary confinement and forced feeding. Shakir Amr, a Saudi national with a British family in South London, including a 10-year-old son he's never met, has been held in Guantanamo Bay without charge or trial since February 2002. Cleared for release by the Pentagon in 2007, his return to the UK was sought by the British government that same year. But negotiations soon ceased and have not been renewed since. Campaigners are hoping that the e-petition reaches 100,000 by May the 14th to qualify for a discussion in Parliament.
Well, joining me in the studio to discuss some of those issues raised in that report are Bishr Al-Rawi and Omar Daghess, two former Guantanamo detainees. Welcome to you both. Bishr, let me first ask you, when you returned from Guantanamo Bay, what was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw that you're a free man and that you've left people behind? What were you thinking of?
I mean, first of all, leaving Guantanamo to the free world is a big, big deal. I was very, very happy, of course. But no sooner than I was happy than I remembered all the brothers we've left behind in Guantanamo. And it's sort of a very, very bitter happiness, really.
Omar, we're coming across all sorts of anniversaries. We had the last, in January, the 10th anniversary since Guantanamo was opened and Shakir Amr was held. And of course, you've been released now a few years. You've been involved in campaigning.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts in relation to this 10-year anniversary, and in particular in relation to Shakir Amr, who you obviously knew in Guantanamo?
It's a big problem because it's been 10 years, and 10 years are very long for those people who are locked up, our friends and inmates who are locked up in Guantanamo Bay. Especially that these people are still innocent. They haven't faced any court of justice nor any normal due process or any legal forms. They didn't have any proper legal process where they can answer the allegations that were made against them. And more so, some of the allegations against them, they themselves they're so secret, they don't even know why they're kept in Guantanamo Bay. So that's a big problem, and it's very, very sad that this happens now after 10 years and they're still locked up, and we don't know when they would be released.
And just in relation to Shakir, what did you understand of him? Why is he still there? What keeps him there?
Shakir, as a person, he's a very kind person that tried to help as much as he can inside Guantanamo. He speaks Arabic and he speaks fluent English, and because of that, he's older than the other inmates, which some of them 18 years old, 16 years old when they were locked up. And he did a lot into, because he involved himself where he would translate, he would be asked to translate for many of those youngsters. And he would be involved into helping them to defend their, you know, if they needed something, he would translate. And because of that, I think the military thought he was somebody maybe very, very important before Guantanamo Bay, which might not be the case. They thought he might be somebody senior. And so the only reason that he's being mistreated as he is now and locked up in Guantanamo is because of what he has become inside Guantanamo, not really what he has done outside Guantanamo, before Guantanamo. Because the allegation that they made against Shaka, most of them are just like the normal, you know, the normal template that they cause everyone when he comes to Guantanamo. So,
and of course, he's never been designated for trial by a military commission. There are no charges against him.
Never was he considered as a dangerous, when they picked him up first, as a dangerous prisoner or somebody who has committed anything. They realized that he is one of those innocent people they picked up in Guantanamo. But because of his activity inside Guantanamo, is just Shakir would never see somebody being oppressed next to him and wouldn't, you know, interfere
and stand up for their rights.
Stuck for their rights. And because of that, I think he's being mistreated as he was.
Bishr, since your return, you've been involved with the Life After Guantanamo project with the organization that you work with, Reprieve. Can you tell me a little bit about what the aims and objectives of the Life After Guantanamo project have been?
I mean, first of all, before we speak about Life After Guantanamo, really we need to understand that people who've left Guantanamo went back home, whether it is the UK or any other country for that matter, and probably less so the UK, but really they had nothing. I remember when I first left, I only had the clothes on me, nothing else. And the first thing my family bought me was some clothes. And those clothes were the first clothes I wore, new clothes I wore for nearly 5 years. And people who've left Guantanamo, consistently, they seem to have nothing. And so many parts of the world, they have been harassed by the governments. They are not allowed to set up a business. For example, they may try to set up a business and the authorities will sort of close them down or harass them or whatever. So really, Life After Guantanamo is to provide some form of support. It's not a financial support as such, but we work with many NGOs all over the countries relevant to Guantanamo, and we get the former prisoners in touch with various NGOs, in touch with us if they have an issue, if they need to get in touch. For example, they need some documents, passport or whatever, to go from one country to another. For example, some detainees were taken to Eastern European countries and they want to return to their own countries after things have settled down. So we facilitate and we help them to go through the process and to get there and get medical care, maybe get education and various things like that.
It's amazing, Omar. You're originally Libyan. And Bishr was talking about, you know, these brothers who were sent over to Eastern Europe, and I went and visited some. You guys gave me gifts to give to them, and it was bizarre. One of them's a Tunisian, one of them is Egyptian. They were returned to these countries because they were afraid of going back to their own, that they could get imprisoned and tortured. But then something happened, revolution.
Yeah.
And this revolution affected Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya, and they all went back eventually. Now they've all gone back.
Yeah.
You've been to Libya also. Tell me the effects, first of all, on somebody who, you come from a background that have faced persecution. Your own father was persecuted to death by all these people, by the Gaddafi regime. What does it feel like as being a former prisoner from Guantanamo to go back as a free man to a place like that?
I mean, everyone, not only me, everyone in Libya has been affected by one way or another. And everyone in Libya, the best thing that you can see in Libya is that you see lots of hopes in the eye of people, coming out from the eyes of people. People are happy and celebrating for their new liberation that they feel. Even though, as you might have heard, there's some small problems inside Libya now, but this is a normal consequences of a dictatorship for 40 years with oppression and you know, misrule of injustices and complete chaos. Libya was in a very bad state. But everything is getting into a better shape and things are improving. And the most best thing that's happening in Libya is that people are very happy and they are looking forward to the future and they're expecting to build up the country. And in Libya, as you yourself know, because you went there and did a program in Libya about the prisons of Abu Salim, that they were some prisons like Abu Slim, there were 1,200 were killed in one day, one night.
In 1996, the Great Massacre there, yeah.
The Great Massacre ordered by Gaddafi and implemented by Abdullah Sunusi, who is now captured in Mauritania, but lots of problems to deport him to Libya. So there were many prisoners in Libya, and many of them were even held by Americans originally, or British or other countries, and then rendered, sent back to Libya, and ended up in Abu Slim prison, the notorious Abu Slim prison, and then some of them died, like Ibn Sheikh.
Libya, of course, extremely topical right now. We have the case of Sheikh Abdul Hakim Bilhaj and Abu Mundhir al-Saadi, who were renditioned from Hong Kong and from Thailand, and then sent over to Abu Salim in the end, with British complicity.
Sadly, not only that, but with their families, isn't it? Their wives and their children, and they were locked up, and they were chained in the plane, and then in the process they were mistreated, and then ended up where they were tortured in Libya, and some even died, like we mentioned Ibn Sheikh al-Libi, who was sent by the Americans first to Egypt, tortured, and then ended up ultimately to Libya, where they killed him in Libya. So, I mean, the plight of many of those people who died in prison, perished in prison, some of them, is very sad. But, you know, there is hope for families, and hope that Libya is improving and things are getting better.
Bringing it back, of course, to the UK and the work with the UK, with our own cases, we all know that we all pretty much believe that we wouldn't have either been sent to Guantanamo or remained in Guantanamo without the involvement of our own government and officials and so forth. And that case was taken to the civil courts, but also now is being criminally investigated. In the case of Shakir, he's still a key figure in all of this. The police want to speak to him about what was done to him. His case is not settled. Bishr, in terms of what you see, do you think that when he returns, he'll be concerned with this? Or from your knowledge, he'll be concerned with bigger things in relation to personal issues?
I think, I mean, Shakir has suffered a lot, really, there's no question. I think he has suffered more than most people in Guantanamo.
Why would you say this?
Well, because as Omar just said, that, you know, he stood up for the wrong. When he saw wrong, he stood up. And for that, he got beaten, and he paid a very hefty price. Now, I think when Shakir comes back, and I hope he does come back sooner rather than later, that he can sort of, for a long while, just focus on rebuilding his life, taking care of his family, and try to sort of make up for the many years that have passed with him being away from his family.
One thing that you must have seen in the Life After Guantanamo project, and in general as being a brother who speaks to people around the world and how they have to reintegrate with their families, become again that person that was gone for all of these years, it's almost unfathomable to think how he will be able to rebuild his life. Do you think there's any process at all that could help him, assist him in this?
First of all, anybody who's been incarcerated for many years and struggling for many years, his psychology, his well-being would have greatly deteriorated. So simply coming back to London to his family is not going to be enough by itself for him to be able to stand up and live a normal life. He would need to be taken care of. He would need to be helped. We all need to be very patient with him. We need to take care of him. We need to, again, for him and other people who've been in similar circumstances, we need to allow for the very difficult experience they've went through. We have to allow for that. So when they get angry, we have to be patient. And when they shout, we have to listen. And when they say something, we have to take note of that, really.
Yeah, but knowing the personality and nature of Shakir, he would be it's very unlikely that he would be not involved in all this. Especially, I think one of the reasons that he's kept in Guantanamo now, because of
say all this meaning in campaigning and fighting for the rights of others.
Yeah, campaigning for the rights of others and people who he left over in Guantanamo still locked up. Because I think one of the reasons, he maybe add on top of what we mentioned, why he's still kept in Guantanamo, is that Shakir remembers very much in details days and names of even generals and names of the guards and incidents, and he has he's aware and he knows and aware about many of the things that did happen and take place. All these wrongdoings that took place in Guantanamo. And he, like Clive Smith, his lawyer, would say, every time I needed to know something, I'd go to Shakir and talk to him, and I'd realize about something, a story that did take place in Guantanamo. And because of that, he was kept in Guantanamo, I think, because of the fear of his personality, how he speaks. He speaks about things, and he's very convincing.
Charismatic.
Charismatic. He's convincing, and then the knowledge of all the things that went on. He was part of the council that was set up between prisoners and the generals and so on, and he knows why things went wrong and how they were deceived and how many things went on. And
it's interesting you mentioned that council, because in 2006 there was they tried to break the prisoner hunger strikes, which they said Shakir was part of the leadership of,
yes.
and the New York Times reported that when he was walking onto the blocks with Shakir,
yes.
Colonel Bumgarner said that the place erupted in takbirs, people saying Allahu Akbar. He said it was like walking on stage with Bon Jovi.
Yeah, he was liked by many people, and I think as you mentioned, General Bumgarner, he is one of the people that probably caused him really lots of damage when he went out. We didn't know this until we came out from prison and we read what he has said about Shakir. It's very sad, because inside prison, Shakir tried to mediate and help him to get better conditions for everyone in prison. And then what Bumgarner has said about Shakir, he was saying that Shakir was a very important Qaeda personality and things like that, which made his plight even more difficult inside Guantanamo.
One thing I would like to say,
yes.
it seems that authorities, whether they're in prison or in the outside world or wherever, it seems whenever somebody tries to work with them and assist them in resolving a problem, and things don't get resolved, they seem to point the finger at that person as if he was the cause of that. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, I've seen this in Guantanamo, and actually I've seen it in London as well.
One thing I wanted to ask you is that there was the case of Mohammed Yusuf al-Gharani, the 14-year-old from Chad, who, of course, Reprieve worked on his case a lot. He told me that he was, after release, that he was taken under the wing of Shakir, and Shakir almost looked after him like a big brother or a father type figure. What type of effects do you think Shakir had on people like al-Gharani?
I think pleasant memories. I mean, as when you're 14-year-old or 15 years old, and you're put in Guantanamo, if you're put anywhere, actually, you'll feel very alien and you'll feel very, very vulnerable. So being under the wing of Shakir, to be honest with you, I mean, I feel that I was at one point or another under the wing of Shakir, and one feels great warmth. And you feel sort of like you have somebody looking out for you, and I think he did that for everybody there.
I think personally, as somebody who lived with Shakir and knew him myself, I say often to people that if we were all seated somewhere and Shakir was with us, you'd probably forget all of us, but you'd remember Shakir Amr. And although it's a very sad case, especially with his children, who now, for all intents and purposes, they don't even know him.
Yeah.
But the fight for his release must continue. Omar, what can we do for him?
I think there's many things many people are doing already, that campaigning, and we can join those campaigns, signing the petitions that we asking Parliament to look at his case and bring his case to platforms like these and talk about him and try to pressurize the American embassy and American officials to release him, because he hasn't committed anything, he wasn't convicted of any crimes, and it's very, very unfair that his imprisonment continues now for the 10th year. So I think I advise myself and encourage everyone else to do more for his release and try to help out, sending letters to the embassies, American embassies, writing letters to the authorities in the United States and so on, putting more pressure. Because most of us here were released not because the courts decided that we were innocent or otherwise, because we never had the chance to answer back in any court case. But most of us were, or 99% of everyone who left Guantanamo left Guantanamo because of the public interest that took place, the campaigning that took place. So, again, I encourage everyone and myself to do more.
That's absolutely true. I mean, with my case, with yours, with all of you, it was very clear that it was something that embarrassed the government that eventually brought about that. I
mean, in my case, I remember one day I was brought some documents which were sent to me by my lawyer, and in it I was reading how the Houses of Parliament were actually talking and discussing my case. And it's very strange that when I look at Shakir's case today, and I come across the communications between ministers and the lawyers and all of that, it seems that it's a photocopy of the letters that were taking place in my situation. And I think this stage about hearing Shakir's case in the House of Parliament, I think that's a very, very important step because the truth will come out.
Yeah.
And I think that's all of this evolves around either hiding the truth or letting the truth shine and shown to everybody.
It's bizarre that we have to push for something that is
Natural,
so
isn't it?
clearly a violation of basic human rights.
Definitely.
Just please, could you argue this in Parliament?
Yeah.
But indeed, your case was argued in Parliament, and that brought about the breakthrough.
These were
didn't
the main, I think that was the positive step that started the process of my release.
Especially that his children are all British and his wife is British, and they have a right as citizens of this country on their MPs and on Parliament that the Parliament should ask the right questions to the Americans. Why is this man still kept in Guantanamo? What are the reasons? What are the evidence against him? He doesn't even have the chance to see the evidence against him and to answer back.
I think in the end, the words like evidence, defense, prosecution, and judge and juries don't exist at all for
they don't
people
exist
in Guantanamo.
whatsoever, and that's why most of the things, when they say it's secret evidence, usually it's flimsy evidence that embarrasses them to make it in public. That's why when you speak so much about these things, usually what they do is they release people out of prison rather than, face courts and face the realities of justice.
Again, it is worth noting that Shakir was part of the settlement process which all of us went through. So he was part of that, and
Acknowledged.
That was acknowledged by the ministers and the government.
We sat down with them and said-
Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program. We've run out of time. We've left on a very important note that we, as the former Guantanamo prisoners, were able to come to some sort of agreement with the government, but we will never agree that Shakir Amar will remain in Guantanamo and that he must be returned to his family. I'd like to thank my guests, the production staff, and you at home for watching. Please get involved with the petition for Shakir's case to be discussed in Parliament. Visit epetitions.direct.gov.uk. Join us again in 2 weeks' time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.